Easy E.
John.
I was very proud of myself on the long run I posted on Saturday. Not just for the long run, not just for the two guys and the dog abandoned me and I finished it. Not just for running through the rain. Here's why I was. The lads are like, right, we're a bit stuck on time. Let's go. We got to go right now. And I was like, no. Get my massage gun. And I sat in the living room by myself. They're all in the kitchen and stuff. I had a few drinks the Friday night and it was around 11 o'clock and I was getting me water into me, a couple of bit of Lucozade. And I went through my entire warm-up, just like we posted on the running group day today. I spent the 8 to 10 minutes going through this entire warm-up, making sure I was all right. Because usually I just go out the door, run and be in bits afterwards. But I got the warm-up in and I felt great. And the reason I say that is not just to pat myself in the back, but no one else will. So I'm doing it.
Yay!
But it's also because this is the first time in any given run day history where we have a podcast guest on and they're talking about their expertise and they're giving their best advice. And I'm like, I did that this weekend. I looked after my body. I got my stretches and my glute activation, all the rest in before going for my long run when it was very easy not to. And that's exactly what we're talking about on this week's episode of the 80 Good Night podcast, where we marry yoga running.
I just delighted you actually ran quick for once.
Do you know what? I didn't even feel it. The mad thing was I managed, actually, before we get started, because it's on the stories, never trust your mates in the area on a running route if they don't run it themselves. So one of our friends, shout out Elaine, I was like, where will I go running around here? Because I don't know the area that well. And she's like, well, you know, you could run up this way and then maybe you could... or you might, and I'm like, right, you don't know where you're going. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run around the lake. If I keep the lake to my right, I'm going to end up back where I started. I was like, yeah. She's like, yeah, that makes sense. I looked up, it was 20K. I said, I've got one question about this. It's the only thing I need to know about the route. Is there footpaths along the way or am I going to end up on a main road? Like, is it going to be safe enough? And she was like, Sean, you'd be grand. That there's one part of the thing we come out of Virginia back down towards where she is. We were on the main road, but there's a fairly big hard shoulder. You will be grand. I swear to you, there was probably 8 feet between me and not even 6 feet between me and the cars coming by me at 100 kilometers an hour because they couldn't cross over because there was cars coming the other way. And I'm like, well, I just got to keep running now. It's the first time I ever ran with headphones. I had headphones in my pocket. I was like, I can't use them. I actually didn't even need to use them. I just enjoyed the run. But I was like, I'm going to die here. But I was like scraping off the nettles all the way down, hitting the bushes, jumping under branches and all that. If I slip here, I'm going to land straight in my head and a car's just going to take me out of it. So never trust mates when it comes to running routes in the area unless you've drove the whole thing yourself first.
Or they run.
On that note, I think we'll go straight into today's episode of the podcast because our guest has a lot to go through on this one, and it's a very, very interesting one on how we finally found a guest that has married yoga and running and has done marathons, but their main practice is yoga.
And the best thing is, it is a story. It's her story as well. And it's why we like bringing people on. We like to get the background because somebody's going to relate to some part of her life story as well, of how she got into things. And it's well worth a listen. It is a long one, you know, but that's the nature of people have stories to tell. And it's brilliant. It's worth every listen. So just go for it.
On that note, guys, this is this week's episode of the Any Given Day podcast. Hit the intro music. Today's episode with our special guest, Jill Leonard. So one of the themes of the podcast over the last couple of years we've been doing the podcast has been trying to get into yoga, and that gap between yoga and run, it's always been one or the other, and trying to marry the two has been difficult. But Eric, you have brought someone onto the podcast today who has experience doing yoga for the last 15 years and has also done a marathon before. So we have pretty much found, we think, the perfect combination of the two. Of course, I don't bring guests to the podcast. Eric, you do. So who do we have today on the Any Given Day podcast?
This week, Sean, as you are a recluse and have no friends, I brought Jill Leonard onto this week's podcast. How are you, Jill? How's things?
Hi, guys. What an intro. Jill. Thank you very much, Sean.
Yeah. He's actually really sociable, Sean, when he gets to know him. Yeah. The problem is no one gets to know him.
No one knows. I like the little podcast corner here at the moment. So, Jill, you you've done yoga since 2006. Am I right in saying that?
2006, yeah. Briefly 2000, but no, I when I started in 2000, I hated it actually, and took it up again in 2006.
Now you're talking.
Controversial, lads. Controversial. Yeah. Took a class in 2000 in my local gym and hated it. Thought it was so boring, and then I walked away from it until events in my life around 2006 that brought me back to it, and I've never looked back since. So yeah,
brilliant. Now,
Jill,
I was looking. Okay, go ahead.
I don't mind. Hold on, I want to
Right.
ask. Was the instructor terrible, or is it just yoga?
I don't know. It might have. It's a long 2000 is a long time ago, so that's 21 years ago, and maybe I was just very young and too young to be ready for it. And it might have been the gym environment for me. I wasn't sure at the time. I don't know. It wasn't. Maybe it was the teacher. I've no idea. But when I went back to it in 2006, it was everything. It was the room, the teacher, the timing of it in my life. So I don't know what it was.
Because I will say I've never hated yoga, but I don't find it easy. But I would never call it boring. That is one thing. And we've had a couple of yoga teachers on, and we have never found it boring. That is definitely, I've never heard someone call it boring. That's amazing.
I think maybe I was told too many times, breathe in, breathe out. And I'm like, I'm doing this anyway since the minute I was born, so telling me to do it. So it may have been the teacher at the time then. Yeah. So it was just not for me at the time.
21 years later, finally getting their a performance appraisal. Right, anyway.
I'm glad I didn't say where the gym was.
Here, look, we'll name it, Shane.
It was 21 years ago. I'm pretty sure that there's been a few turnover in yoga coaches from there.
Maybe.
So was it different? I was looking at your bio there. Was it different kinds of? I'm not going to lie. I have no idea what type of yoga I'm about to talk about. I'm about to butcher how it's said, but somehow you went from Ashtanga yoga.
Yes.
We're close there. I feel like I'm reading like a foreign menu
language
here.
To
Vinyasa.
Vinyasa. Yes.
Vinyasa. Very close.
You were going to say Vin Diesel.
The Vin Diesel yoga. So the yoga went fast and furious. Sum up what I've just said in the last 30 seconds, pretty much. Like what change and contrast in yoga, and like what's going on there?
Okay, so in 2006, when I found myself in a yoga room, and from the minute I walked in that door, I was in love with the practice. And it was possibly the teacher, it was possibly where I was, it was possibly the time in my life, and I really needed it. And I found myself in an Ashtanga yoga class in the yoga room in Marion Road in Ballsbridge. And the teacher, and I do not mind naming this guy because he's a legend. His name is Tony Purcell. And I rocked up in a pair of tracksuit bottoms, heavy tracksuit bottoms, didn't take my socks off, found myself at a level 1 Ashtanga yoga practice, and walked away absolutely sweating like I've never sweated before, but thoroughly invigorated. Beyond belief invigorated. And I went back 2 nights later, went back another night, went back. And this went on for weeks and weeks and weeks, and just found I was spending a fortune on yoga classes and parking in Ballsbridge. But I was so addicted to it, like it was a drug. And with the Ashtanga at the time, for me, it was the discipline of it. The practice was, it's the same pose, the same sequence of poses every time you practice it, with that development of a little bit more as time went by. So there was progression to be made, plenty progression to be made with it. And then I discovered I moved house, so I wasn't going to that yoga center anymore. I was going somewhere else, and was experiencing Ashtanga as well as Vinyasa flow, which kind of uses a lot of poses from the Ashtanga practice, but changes the flow of them around a little bit and makes it a bit more transitional. And I preferred it then. I had sort of moved away from the Ashtanga at that point because I thought if there was elements of the practice that I didn't like to do or couldn't do, then I go, oh, I don't want to do that now, you know. And I found myself in a class that was Vinyasa flow, and it shook it up a bit for me, you know. It was like, you know, ordering a different drink in a bar because you're used to the same one all the time. And it was just different and enjoyable and flowing, and it was lovely. So I've moved around from different styles, practiced pregnancy yoga on both my pregnancies as well, and just found the restorative nature of pregnancy yoga to be wonderful. So I love to try them all. I love to try different ones. But when I started to teach, I decided to do a teacher training course in 2012 when I was on my first maternity leave, and coincidentally found myself applying to the school on the Marion Road where I had done my first yoga practice, without realizing that my first teacher was going to be this Tony Purcell again. And it was such a lovely coincidence. It was lovely to see him again after all those years. And I knew he knew what he was doing. I knew he knew what he was talking about. So I just found myself back there again and in that lovely place. And I fully believe that that's the yoga room that brought me, that's the place that brought me to loving yoga. And the teachers in that school were phenomenal. So then I found my own groove and what did I want to do? So I took a little bit of my Ashtanga practice, a little bit of my Vinyasa flow practice and Hatha practice, and mixed it up a little bit when I started to teach. And just found the variety was suited me. It suited me to change it around a bit, you know.
I found myself shook in a lot of rooms, but I've never woke up doing yoga after it. But it's so I know we've named a lot, so there's people probably listening going, like, what are these words? What are they doing? You mentioned that I guess it's the same lesson. It's like a football team going through its warm-up drills. We're going to start at the ankles, move our ways into the calf.
Yes.
Is that what it is? Is that so? We're going to do the same poses in sequence, and then that's it. You just see your natural development.
That's exactly it. Yeah, that's exactly it, Eric. So when I was practicing Ashtanga the first time, I found myself Googling it a lot as well during the time, and discovered that within the Ashtanga practice, there was a couple of different series. So you have the primary series, which starts you off with a number of sun salutations, and you do, say, 5, or you could do up to 10 of those sun salutations, which is a sequence of poses. And you know them, and you drill them in. They're almost methodical, you know. You drill them into your mind, and then you can do them. And then you might move on to a second set of sun salutations, and it includes something else. And then you'll move on to a standing sequence of poses, and it's the same ones that you go through all the time. But as I was doing my teacher training, actually, my teacher at the time, Tony, had said, Jill, will you ever take that Ashtanga practice and throw it out the window, for God's sake? Because, you know, I'm going to ask you to come up with a sun salutation that is not from the Ashtanga practice. So you need to move away from that, and you need to find your own sequence of poses that you can call your sun salutation. And it, you know, from raising arms to bending knees to folding forward to, you know, coming into a plank, bringing yourself into a downward dog. But it's how you bring yourself to those different poses or those different levels or pillars of the sun salutation, where what I found to be really enjoyable, and I could have some fun with it as well, because I had spent a lot of money on, like, I had invested quite a lot of money in yoga, you know, from all the classes, the teacher training course that I did, the different places that I drove to visit, the gear, the yoga mats, all the bits and pieces that I was having delivered to my house, you know. So I said, I'll have a little fun with this, you know, and then I started to come away from the really disciplined Ashtanga practice. Now I find myself coming back to it every so often when I'm on my mat and I'm going, what'll I do today? You know, what practice will I do today? I haven't a clue. Just start off with 5 sun salutations, the ones you know, and then you'll warm yourself up, and then your mind will settle, and then your breathing will find its zone and its own groove, and then you can do what the hell you want after that. So, yeah, that's been my biggest challenge, I suppose, was to probably try and come away from what I had learned through Ashtanga, and to bring it into a more of a flow. So,
Can I just ask as well, I've been in some of Sean's classes and I know he just makes up the torture on the spot. Are you when you're in a class and people are taking part, does anything ever just come to you and be like, oh, this would be a really nice transition and this will get something more just from what you're feeling in your own body? Or how does it work? Because I know Sean just says, are they sweating? No, burpees, you know, like that. Yeah, that's
burpees are gross. Yeah,
he's good. He's good at that. But how does it work in terms of, obviously, Sean's very good at it and he's excellent at it. He understands the level of a beginner. He's always aware of people's, he takes himself out of it and his abilities. How does it work for a yoga instructor to do that kind of thing as well with a client, especially now over Zoom when particularly you're not seeing them? Like what would be, how do you kind of gauge a beginner yoga?
That's true. Now I don't have experience of teaching on Zoom. It was something I chose not to do. Because I think life was hard enough. I didn't really, I think I probably would have liked to, but said, no, I'm not going to do it. However, when I'm in a class or in a room with a number of people, sometimes it can depend on the number of students that might be in the room and their abilities. So if I find, I will always do my class plan beforehand. So I will always have my stick men drawn on my piece of paper beforehand, and I'll go from my sun salute A and into my sun salute B, or then I'll do my warrior sequence or something, and then I might find, oh God, there's one now I might try. So I'll ignore the piece of paper and I'll say, well, while you're standing in a forward bend, let's work on shoulders. Let's see, can we, work into the shoulders a little bit more? So walk your hands out in front of you and come up onto your tippy toes. And, whereas beforehand, I might have brought them into a different warrior sequence or a different warrior pose. And a lot of times I'll do that depending on what I'm seeing the guys in front of me do. If they're, as you said there, if they're not sweating enough, or if they don't look challenged enough, or if I think, oh God, this would be a nice one to throw in here. And if it doesn't work out, then we'll just come back to what I have written in front of me. And I've done that quite a lot. And I love having a bit of fun at the end, especially when, you've got loads of wall space, having a little bit of fun with, half handstands or shoulder stands, using the wall and bringing yourself out a little bit, or headstands even up against the wall sometimes. Just to shake it up. It might not have been in the original class plan, but if you know that the people in front of you look like they're really getting into it and they're not struggling and they're having a good time, then, they might be asking you, can we try them at the end? Can we try the wall stuff at the end?
We really need to gauge people's idea of fun.
I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, there's a sense of achievement, I suppose.
And look, the reason I asked about beginners is yoga is probably one of the hardest workouts I've ever done. And anyone who's listening doesn't believe me, I highly recommend, and we've said it every time.
Yeah.
Going to a yoga class, I have sweated, I've been uncomfortable. It's very difficult. And then, like you said, someone's telling you to breathe, and the anger
Shut
level
up, I am.
rises, and you're like, I thought this was supposed to be relaxing.
Yeah, no, I know. It's funny. I often find that my if I haven't practiced in a few days or haven't done anything in a few days because of life getting in the way, which is wrong. Let's just say that. I find that my muscles are coiled and they're tight and they're sore, but not to the point where when I come back from a yoga class that's particularly strenuous, I have found muscles on muscles and bits of my body that I didn't even know were there, and they're bloody killing me. So you're dead right, Eric. There's sometimes nothing relaxing about it, and sometimes I only go for the shavasana, which is the relaxation at the end. And sometimes I might say to my guys as well, look, lads, if you don't want to bother practicing, if you don't want to do any of the physical poses, if you're just here to get away from the family and the dogs and the televisions on full blast, just come in and lie in shavasana, which is corpse pose, which is what you do at the end, and lie, because that in itself on its own is a yoga pose, and it's a pretty challenging one because you're alone with your thoughts. So I would always say to them, look, if you just rather not, if you've had a bad day and you just can't do your practice, come and lie down on your mat. And I would invite them to just do that, because that's very hard to lie there with yourself sometimes, knowing other people around you are hopping around on their mats,
knowing that each session has its own different goals for different people. Like sometimes I think a class is only good if I absolutely sweat myself out, where sometimes you just need that kind of pull back and stuff.
Yeah.
Speaking of different goals and stuff, how did you go from different flows and all the rest into yoga, and all of a sudden you're like, I want to do a marathon? Like, how did you go from in the studio to out hitting the roads for 42K? What happened there?
I'll tell you what happened. Stress hit, and like yoga isn't my full-time job. I have a full-time sedentary job, Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, at a desk. And when I had children and when I had a full, when I went back full time, and I'm realizing I'm raising a family and I'm working full time and I'm trying to make something of myself. And I was teaching a couple of yoga classes during the week at the time. I had no time for Jill. So I had no time for me. One of the reasons I came to yoga in 2006 was possibly stress in my life, and that's the serious part of it, and that's the bit of it that manifested in me. I was in a car accident in 2004, and where I wasn't in the car, but I was knocked down by a car in 2004 on my way home from work, and I kind of walked away from the accident after the hospital later on that evening, but back pain started to manifest over time. And I could never say for sure that it was the car. I could never say for sure it was pregnancies, or it was the sedentary day job, or it was life. So it was possibly a combination of all of those. And I am getting to your question, I promise. It's a combination of all of those things that started to manifest for me in the weakest part of my body, which is my lower back. And I had displaced my sacrum on my second pregnancy, and I needed to have a lot of work to put that back in. And I had obviously done a lot of damage over time. And my continuation of my Ashtanga practice, and I'm going to go against the grain here when I say this, but my continuation of my Ashtanga practice, while all of this was manifesting and all of this was happening in my life, I was starting to resent it. I was starting to feel like, I was blaming it for doing me damage, whereas really it was me, it was my ego, it was me trying to do too much, me trying to be everything for everybody, but being nobody for myself at the same time. And I was actually out of work for a couple of months with the back pain. It was chronic. It was affecting my sleep. It was affecting my work, my relationships with people. And in my head, then I was going, I should know what to do here. I'm a trained yoga teacher. I should know my body. I should know self-awareness came into it. And all of that stuff was making me feel a lot worse about myself. So, I ended up having some treatment on my back, which was the best thing that ever happened in that year, in that time. I found a freedom of movement. I found a freedom in life. I was sleeping the full night again. I could remember how to do my day job again. All of these things were starting to fix themselves. So one day, about 2 or 3 weeks after I'd had that treatment, I was thinking about going back to work. It was July 2017. I was thinking, I think I'm ready to go back to work. So I put on my runners and I said, I'm not taking out my yoga mat. I'm not ready for that yet. I put on my runners and I ran up the road to the hotel. We have a hotel at the roundabout here, and it's kind of a landmark for between the running between the roundabouts locally here. So I ran up there. It was a beautiful morning, and I sat on a hill and I meditated for a bit. So I was like, this is cool. This is a bit of meditation, a bit of sun in my face. Got myself into a downward dog. There was nobody around. Nobody was looking at me. Did a few yoga practice poses on that grassy hill. And I thought, I actually feel so alive again. I really feel amazing. I'm ready to go. I've never felt like this before, physically, emotionally, mentally. I'm good to go. So I ran home. And now I stop-started, don't get me wrong, I still stop-start, but that's fine. So I ran home, and I felt like telling the whole world what I had just done, even though it was probably 7 kilometers all in. I wanted to tell the whole damn world what I had just done, and I was delighted. So then I got this notion into my head. So this was 2017. I'm going to do the women's mini marathon in June. Did the women's mini marathon in June and loved every minute of it, and thought, I don't think I'm ready to stop there. Over the years, I'd probably done a few 5Ks and one other 10K. And I'm so, my mind gets the better of me. So I'm very much mind over matter. This process became slow, but constant in my head, where I was lying awake, say, when you wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning and you're thinking, oh God, I don't really want to get up yet, but I should. Maybe I should get up and go for a run. And then I'd say it's so ridiculous, but then I started to do that. And then I started to, I know, yeah. Right. So then I started doing that and seeing the sunrise and hearing the birds and the dawn chorus and all of those things were happening. And I thought, this is really cool. So I do my yoga practice before I went out, and I do my stretches, and I get up the road and I go to my grassy hill up the road at the hotel, do a few more poses, and make my way home again. And I found that, everyone says it, running is a drug. It's an addiction. It's the serotonin. It's the addiction. It's the feel good. It's the, oh Jesus, I hate this, but I love this. I hate running, but I love running. I hate running in the rain, but I need the rain when it's heavy and hot and all of that. So it's a love hate for me. And then I got this mad notion into my head that wouldn't it be amazing to do the Dublin City Marathon in its 40th year, which is also my 40th year. So the 2019 Dublin City Marathon was their 40th, and it was my 40th too. So I was going to turn 40, which happened to be last June. I'm going to do that. So it's 40th and my 40th year. So I started training for it using the KBC plan on Facebook. So they'd post week 1, then they'd post week 2. And I followed that for beginners. And I signed up to all the
very
series.
Very average plan. Our one is so much better than that. Very average.
Oh, Jill takes her foot out of her mouth.
I hope this story ends in you not being able to do the marathon after following their plan.
I hadn't met you yet, Eric. So I can't wait to try your plan actually for this marathon this year. So no pressure, right? So anyway, I toddled along and I continued, and I heard you guys on a podcast earlier on talking about missing a long run because you'd had too much birthday cake or something like that. I missed a few of them, I have to be honest. And life gets in the way, I have to be honest with you. I missed, and I remember somebody said to me, the biggest tip I'll give you is if you miss any of those runs, don't make them up. You've just got to move on, because you can't rebreathe the same air you breathed yesterday. So you just have to keep going. You have to move on. If you miss your long run, you're on. You have to get on to the next one. So I did that, and I did the 10K and then the 10 mile and then the half marathon and then all the rest of them. The one I remember doing a 3/4 marathon and hated it and thought, how am I going to run the Dublin City Marathon in 3 weeks' time? I remember I was texting my dad and I said, Dad, if I fell into that ditch right now, I'd probably just fall asleep. You might just have to come and get me, because I'm wrecked. I was running backwards at one point and I was going up the hill backwards because my legs were gone. My hips were in bits, my knees were in bits. And then 2 days later, I remember driving home in cruise control because I was trying to do these quad stretches in the car. And I thought, first of all, this is bloody dangerous. And second of all, second of all, how the hell are you going to do the Dublin City Marathon in 3 weeks' time? So I got home into the ice bath, all the rest, hated the 3/4. I felt like the 3/4 for me wasn't an achievement, because the half marathon was a great achievement. My first half marathon was the rock and roll one that year around Dublin. That was very good. And that was my first ever one. And I really enjoyed that. For me, was a finish line rather than a finish time, as was the marathon, as was the 3/4. But I felt the 3/4 was just too in-betweeny for me. And then when I got to Dublin and I was raring to go, I was terrified I was going to get sick or something was going to happen to me, or I wasn't so much terrified of injury, because I felt, having overcome all that back pain a couple of years beforehand, nothing could actually be worse than that. So I really took care of myself, minded myself. My body was an absolute temple for those weeks, and or should I say months, and still is. And I remember driving into Dublin then that day and thinking, Jesus, I'm really emotional. I could burst into tears or flames right now, and nothing is going to change that. It was fabulous. And I did it on my own, and I trained more or less on my own. And for me, it was my headspace. It was I'm home from work. I'm not with the family. I'm not, trying to figure out lunches and dinners and all of that sort of stuff. My training was my time, my headspace, my shouting at myself, talking to myself, smiling to myself sometimes, and doing it then, and realizing that the atmosphere was what got me around that course in Dublin city centre. A lot of the spots where, I grew up in Dublin, so a lot of the spots were my stomping ground. It was a beautiful way to see the city, and you don't need an open top bus when you have your runners on you, and I just thought it was a beautiful way to see the city, and it was a lovely achievement for me. So I kind of thought then, how do I come back to yoga, or does yoga still have a place in my life? And bloody hell, I needed it 2 days later. No, I don't have stairs in my home. So I was really lucky in that sense that I didn't have to climb up or down stairs. But even getting in and out of bed was torture. And then 2 days later, when I realized that, you need to do something, you need to start moving again. If you don't move, you'll actually break. So to be able to come back to lying on my mat and just finding some sort of center point for me again, or even standing on my mat and raising the arms up overhead and giving my side bodies just a really good stretch, or a 4 or 5, just bringing all those little subtle stretches back into my day to day was what helped me to recover from the marathon. So that, and the drug of when can I do that again? It was amazing, and I haven't done one since. 2020 hit, and the C word. So I had signed up for Belfast, and I had signed up for Dublin again, and Dublin turned into a lottery then, I think. So I was just thrilled that I got in, because I had participated the previous year, and I didn't do the virtual because I need the people, I need the crowds, I need the buzz, I need the music, all the banners, all of that sort of stuff. I need to see all of that to get me around the course. So that's how I went from yoga to running and back to yoga again.
Well, you thoroughly answered that question anyway. How was the back? Just for I think a lot of people that was like you went from back treatment, because I think a lot of people the majority of people suffer with their lower back this day and age, and it's like I need more rest and that's it. But it's really the opposite. It's really you need to find a way to get active and find stuff that works for you. And I know everyone's got different chronic lower back pain, but like you just proved it there that you found your own thing, and no issues though with the back now.
None. And you know what's funny, Sean? The only time I have trouble with my back is when I don't run. If I don't run for 3 or 4 days, I start to feel like, oh Jesus, it's coming back, it's niggling back in at me. It is if I don't bend, I break. If I don't move, I seize up. So a walk won't do for it. It won't do it for me. But it's when I come home from that, it might be 2 or 3 kilometers, just shaking off those cobwebs that you've mentioned before. It changes me back to movement again, and it's fantastic. So if I don't run, the back pain is back.
That's just thinking my own back pain, just what you said, and just the fact that people, it's very. I know a couple of people that suffer lower back pain, and when you reach that to them about yoga or running, straight away you see the shield comes up, and they're just like, you don't know what you're talking about. It's like, kind of been through it. I do. And your back pain is the same as my back pain. And it's a different advice. Like, 10, 15 years ago, maybe a bit more. If you had a lower back issue, you were told, stay in bed for 3-4 weeks. And that's literally the worst thing you could do, is just find a way to get up and keep moving. And you found that, and you found setting those goals and stuff like that. So when all that happened, when you went back into yoga at the end of 2019, then did your yoga different flows and stuff that change because of the running, or did you do your own thing right now, and how does that work now, your program?
It did. And I found that some poses were easier for me because my mind was different. Some poses were a little bit harder. I was practicing a lot of headstands before the back pain kicked in, and I'd fall out of some of them. I would fall out of them, and I'm not going to lie, I have to be honest about that. So they may have had a contribution to the overall issue, but I did find that I was changing my practice to be a little bit more restorative. So I wasn't throwing my legs in the air for that headstand. I didn't need to. Yeah. My ego changed as well. And I found that if I practice, 40 sun salutations and do nothing else, or 5 sun salutations and do nothing else, I don't need to be bending into pretzel shapes in order to be achieving a decent yoga practice, because yoga is not just a physical practice. There are actually 8 limbs of yoga, and which I studied during my teacher training, and I found that to be mind-opening, and meditation came into it as well. And for me, then, noticing the difference in the change of my practice became much more thoughtful. So remembering that you said, Jill, you said to yourself that your Ashtanga practice was causing you that back pain, then what are you going to do about it? Somebody said to me in a yoga practice ages ago, how do you do forward bends if you've got an issue with your lower back? And I said, well, I'll only fold forward as much as I can. And my mind knows how far it can go. And then I'll try a little bit more, and then I'll work on the breathing that, irritates me when I go to somebody else's class. But, I'll work on all of those different things, and I'll see how can I get a little bit further? Can I stretch an extra 5 degrees into that forward bend? And then I realize, oh, Jesus, I'm back. Beforehand, I couldn't have touched my thighs. In 17, I couldn't have touched my thighs or my knees without screaming in pain. Whereas now I'm back to standing on the palms of my hands, where it took me years to get back to that. It took me years of removing the ego and remembering that it's progress and it's bit by bit by bit by bit by bit. And I was at that bottom of my practice, and the only way is back up again. The only way you can come out of that is to grow back up again. And I've done that, and I'm delighted with myself. And I was back practicing my headstands again about a year ago or so. And again, it's bravery. It's remembering. My body remembers that it can do this because it's done this dozens of times before. My mind is a lot stronger. My mind is so much stronger now than it's ever been. And a lot of things are mind over matter, especially when it comes to me and what I can achieve and what I can do. It's if my mind tells me I can do it, then my body will fall alongside. It will fall in alongside it.
It's brilliant that you've said that as well, because everything you've said is pretty much the mantra of a marathon runner or someone who's going to run a marathon. It's mind over matter. It's consistency in training, and you'll run your marathon in October, and then January will roll around. You'll try and run 3K at the pace you ran your marathon, and you're like, how did I ever do a marathon at this? It is that case that, if you don't use it, you'll lose it, So, but you do have to let yourself take that step back as well and recover. As you said, you don't need to be bent into a pretzel. You just have to do some little things, and the meditational side, as me and Sean will always say as well, like, there's more to running than just running. There's so much more that comes with it. There's the extra calories lost, the enjoyment of food. We'll always say we're having a beer and stuff, the guilt-free those. And then there's when we ran with Dara last week, the 3 of us ran out. In fairness to Dara was in around his 85th kilometre on the run. And all of us just ran in silence for about 5 kilometres. No one needed to say anything. We all just knew where we were. Yeah. I was off on my holidays somewhere else. Sean was taking a torture for his clients. And Dara was probably just holding on for dear life. But each of us were in our own different element. And it is that stage where you just reach, and it is similar with yoga. And the course pose you talk about is probably one I struggled with. It was just being idle and shutting up and just relaxing.
Shut up and sit down.
And it is. There's a lot of comparisons, I suppose. So it's 2021. Say we're moving into 2020, or even for this marathon season. How would you include yoga and running? How would you marry the two? There is a lot of similarities. What would you do if you were going to do it? How would you manifest, or how would your flows be?
And the first, when you contacted me a couple of months ago, Eric, my first, when I started thinking about all of this, my first thing was, what pained me the most after the marathon? What was the sorest part of my body, apart from all of it at one point? But what was the first sorest bit after I was trained, after I did the marathon? And it was my hips. It was the just the joint in my hips and the sheer lack of power that my legs had left in them. So for me, that was, first of all, you've already decided, you fool, that you're going to run another marathon and you still have 6 kilometers to go here in this one, or 6 miles to go in this one. You've already met all of your family who have chased you around this marathon route, which I would have been lost without. And you've decided you're doing another. That's the first sorest part of your body was my hips. So, the hips are they're almost, I don't know, but are they almost the dead center of the body? And, it's where, so many muscle, families of muscles are all brought together. It's where you move from, you do everything from your hips. So where do I start when I go to rebuilding my strength again and toning up again? And for me, it was working on hips. And if it was such simple poses, like I couldn't be bothered taking out my yoga mat today, but you know what, I've TV on there and I lie down on the mat and I'll just do some, hip extensions, or the cat-cow pose is another favorite of mine, just for waking up the spine and getting right into the lower back again. And poses that work on the hips for me is a big one. And I love that. But I also find with hip opening poses or hip poses, we carry a lot of our emotions in that area of our body as well. So I often find I'll tear the head off somebody later on that day, or I'll bawl my eyes out, because it is that emotional place. It's certainly where I carry my emotions. And I've become so aware of those areas of my body where pain manifests or tension manifests or emotions might manifest. So when I started to work on what practice will I do now to support my running, first of all, I always incorporate my favorite poses. So my favorite poses, like a standing wide leg forward bend, which I find was where one I couldn't do 4 years ago, but I was doing it 6 years ago. And I'm back to loving that pose again. And I'm back into working on that pose to bring me back into my headstands, my downward dogs, my anything that's stretching out the back of the body, anything that's going to stretch out the sides of the body, my triangle poses, standing lunges, a lot of the things that will, we talk about quads and glutes and hamstrings and all those areas that when they tighten up, you're nearly done for. If you've I've never pulled a muscle in my life, actually. And I'm very blessed to say that, apart from the back pain, I've never pulled a muscle or torn a muscle or anything like that, but my husband has. And, seeing him recover from those and seeing the physio that he has gone through for those, will always make me incorporate, hamstrings, hips, glutes, and quads being those muscles that are making the legs move. And the core, of course, because, you don't have to do much movement to work on your core. And that's what I like too, because you can do core work watching TV in the evening time. You can do core work, anywhere. So even if it is just engaging low abdomen muscles and still trying to breathe through while you're contracting those muscles in, for me is it's any 5 seconds or 10 seconds that I can grab in the day to work on them helps me to build up my little practices before I go out for my run. And I will always do a yoga practice before I go out for a run. Even if it's up against the wall out the front, because it's the only place I can get peace. It's a forward bend with the hands on the wall, or I'm putting my foot up on the wall to stretch the hamstrings. Windowsills, car bonnets, my own, obviously, not somebody else's, but just to find somewhere to stretch it out. And I'm so grateful and delighted that I have that in me to be able to just stop and pull out a pose, because I do it when I'm out running as well, and I will find a quieter spot to just go down in the grass and do a downer. I couldn't care less who's looking at me, but just to do a downer facing dog, and to bring in, I'm trying to figure out what name of the pose is, but just to bring in that hip stretch into my downward facing dog as well in my king pigeon pose, which is so easy to do. People are doing it all the time. They don't realize they're doing it. And it's the combination of mid-running yoga, stop and drop and get into a downward facing dog, or, give yourself a bit of a long stretch with the arms in the air, just to find a little bit more space in the hips and a little bit more space in the sides of the body, a little bit more space in the lower back. And just knowing what it is I needed when I was running. I can't be alone in needing that. So it's a great opportunity to be able to share that with other people as well. So
and as you said there, that's exactly what we're going to hopefully do, and that's why I'm taking jabs at KBC's training plan. But we are going to include some of your yoga in the training plan as well, which is absolutely brilliant. It is something for myself and Sean. Sean, with his back, is always conscious of his back on the long runs, and it stretches his glute activation stuff. Myself, I have been forced into taking more pride in my stretching and yoga, and it's still not perfect. There's still days I'll leave my run till the last minute. I'll get the 10k in and I'm straight on to the next thing in the day. So it is brilliant. I think anyone who's going to take this seriously, anyone can do a 5 and 10k, and I mean that genuinely. Anyone can run a pair of shoes, and at some point, whether they walk or run, will cover the distance, and probably not be too sore. Anything over that, you really need to start thinking about the body and think about what the body is going to go through repeatedly for a very long time. And I think yoga, and we've always said it as well, it is a fantastic marry up the two. They really do complement. And if anyone's, I know some people are saying finish line over time, but if you are thinking time, it is something you have to think about as well. It is going to help your performance. It's going to get you that extra couple of minutes of freedom in the hips before they ease up. For me, it happened 8 kilometers from the finish. If that was 4k from the finish of a 15-minute quicker, everything is relative for that one, and it's absolutely brilliant. But Jill, people are going to be able to get in touch very soon with a couple of your yoga classes. Isn't that right?
That's right. Yeah. That's
so
right.
Mid-July.
Mid-July, yeah. And isn't it a 4-week course?
Yeah, we're going to run 4 weeks. Have I got the details right? And if we're lucky, we might run 5 weeks and get people up to September for that back to school.
Yes, of course.
We're going to bring people up to September. So starting in mid-July, Jill's going to run her yoga classes. It'll be through the Any Given Training Day app. So for those who are listening, might necessarily have tried yoga or given it a go, definitely give it a go. We'll probably send out 1 or 2 sample classes for people to try along before they get involved as well. And it's absolutely amazing. Myself and Sean have done your class. 2 of us were not happy with you, we're not going to lie. And it's only because the class was good. And I mean that wholeheartedly. I was frustrated with my flexibility once again. So consistency has to come back. So mid-July, you'll see Jill and those who are doing the marathon plan will be getting a couple of nice stretches that we can say. And it will be the side of the curb, beside the tree, the bonnet, the windowsill kind of stretches that any runner should be doing. That will bring so much more to your run. But Jill, it has been a whirlwind of a story, and the best part is people feel like they know you now before they
good.
Everyone has a story. Everyone has a bit of a background. Yeah, I've had my own back issues that I couldn't cross a road. Never mind run a marathon, and it is brilliant to hear it from a yoga instructor, because not everyone is. The honesty is brilliant, and thanks so much for coming on to share the story with us.
Thanks for having me.
We'll hopefully see you do a marathon with us as well. That's
that'd be amazing. Yeah. Although I won't tell you what I did my 19 marathon in. I won't tell you the time. For me, it was definitely a finish line rather than a finish time, and I'm not sure I'll be beating it this year. But look here, who knows? I'll see you in the pub afterwards.
Anyone who can take on 42.2 is already a winner, and that's it.
True.
There's many people that'll sit on the couch and badmouth it. You've done it, and it's
so much more fun than you think it is when there's thousands of people lining the streets.
100%.
The pizza is beautiful afterwards.
The pints are beautiful afterwards.
The pints are beautiful afterwards.
Speaking of which,
And on that note, we will wrap up this week's episode
I love it.
of the Any Given Monday podcast. Guys, we'll have more details on Jill's yoga sessions in the show notes for the podcast and links and stuff and how to sign up. With that said, that is it from myself, Jill, and Eric. That's it from the three of us. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.